Welcome to another episode of Financially Fit Radio. My name is Cory Sickles here with Safe Harbor Retirement Group and Wealth Advisors. If you'd like more information about what you hear on today's show, just give us a call at 614-760-0670 or feel free to visit our website at safeharboroh.com. And while you're on our website, feel free to click on that radio page. You can check out past shows as well as subscribe to our show on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, or Spotify. Also, feel free to head on over to our YouTube page. You can type in Safe Harbor Retirement Group. You can watch today's show on there, as well as other financial videos. And obviously, we're here to address any questions you might have, and you can also set up a complimentary, no obligation meeting with us. Just give us a call again at 614-760-0670. or visit our website at safeharboroh.com. Today we're going to talk about mistakes people make in their retirement planning. I think it's going to be a great conversation here. But before we kind of dive into that topic, let me introduce to you my co-host this week and every week, and that's Tony Shore. Tony, how are you today?
Thanks for asking. I'm great, Cory, and I'm excited about this topic. I think a lot of people do make costly mistakes in retirement. So this is going to be a good one. And we're going to touch on some really important things our listeners out there are going to want to know about so they can save some money and have a more successful retirement. But yes, I've been great watching some playoff football. Love that. I got to spend some time with my son again this past weekend and getting ready for our big trip. Cory, I'm meeting you at the big conference. We're going to be in Nashville for a financial conference. I'm excited about that. You and I both used to live in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, we did.
We didn't even know it. We were there at the same time and didn't know each other at the time.
Back in the 90s. I moved down there in 93 and actually left Nashville in 2009. So
yeah, I moved there in 93 as well. And left in 98, though, about 6 years.
Yeah. We were in two different businesses at that point in time.
Yes,
then.
we were. I was in radio and entertainment, working promotions for the labels, radio promotions, and doing radio. I was on the radio there for a while, way FM and Lightning. And so,
I was fresh out of college, just trying to figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life, Tony.
Yeah, you're a young pup. I got a couple years on you at least, Cory. But okay, so this topic today, mistakes in retirement planning, that's a big one. I bet when people first come to you, a lot of times people come to you, they're 55, they're 60, they're in their 60s and they're saying, hey, we're getting ready to retire. How can you help us? And you look at and you're like, oh, you've already, maybe they're 62 and they already filed for Social Security and they probably shouldn't have, or things like that. There's a lot of mistakes people can make in retirement planning, isn't there?
There are, Tony. And obviously, the sooner that you begin thinking about this stuff, you're going to be in a better situation when that day does come. It's hard to believe. We're just talking about, back in the early, mid 90s, I was fresh out of college. Now I'm sitting here going to be 55 this year, 10 years away from Medicare. If you think about it.
Don't think about it that way, Cory. Don't.
But no. I mean, it's getting closer. The easiest part, the easiest thing to do is hopefully be able to save. But the one thing that I think, and, I'm not going to say everybody, but one of the most common mistakes I think people make is not saving enough. You should be saving somewhere between 10 to 15% of whatever you earn today to be able to, have the lifestyle that you want in retirement. Now, I will say this, Tony, the earlier that you do start saving, the easier it's going to be on you, as you near retirement.
Yeah.
Sometimes what I end up finding out or working with people is they really haven't done they haven't really done a good enough job saving. Let's face it, when you first come into the workforce, eventually, you might get married, you might buy a house, you're going to have kids. Now you have to pay for college.
Yeah.
But with all that stuff going on, you still need to be able to somehow be able to save for retirement. And one thing I would highly recommend is you sit down and work with a financial advisor. We're going to be able to at least show you, by what you're saving today, if you're in your 30s, 40s, or even 50s, what is that going to look like for you when you get to that retirement age around 65, 67, or whatever age you're really truly trying to retire? So, save it, save as much as you possibly can. The earlier, again, the earlier you start, the less you're going to have to save. But again, I'd highly recommend that you work with an advisor to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Saving is key, obviously, and starting as soon as you can. So wherever if there's someone out there listening that wherever they're at, wherever our listeners are at, now's the time. And if they haven't already started, and if they have, they might want to get a second opinion on where they're at so they can make the right moves to be ready to not run out of money in retirement and have a comfortable retirement or enough money to meet their goals. I mean, and I know everyone you meet with, probably down to each and every person that comes through the doors there and works with Safe Harbor on retirement planning. I'm sure they all say the same thing I do. I wish I had started sooner. I wish I had started putting more away when I was in my 20s and got my first full-time job. I didn't even take advantage of a 401k back then. I could have, but I didn't. And I wish I had. It took me a while to figure it out. Hey, I got to be saving money here, right?
Yeah, you do have to be able to save money. And, one of the things that you can do now, if you're over the age of 50 also, Tony, is you have what they call catch-up contributions, which basically means you can put up to $30,000 into your 401k. Now,
Wow.
we've discussed on the show, should you put it into a regular 401k, or should you maybe potentially put it into a Roth 401k? I'm a firm believer, pay your taxes now, put it in that money that can grow tax free.
Yep.
But the worst case scenario, if you're not putting it into your Roth, at least you're putting it into your 401k. But take advantage of those catch up contributions again, because you can put more in, you can save more. And again, as soon as you can turn 50, you can start doing that. And I'd highly recommend to be able to take advantage of that, because that's going to allow you to build a sufficient nest egg or retirement nest egg when that day does come.
Yeah. And some people say, well, I can't put any more than I do, or, they think they're putting in as much as they can. And in almost every case that I've seen, and I know this has been true with myself, my wife and I look at, in most cases, they can. You think you can't, but you can. You can cut in other areas. And if you have that money just taken out, you don't miss it. Right. It's not in your take home. Right. So that's a good thing to do, is have it taken right out of your check, or as soon as your check's cut, have a certain amount go into a traditional IRA or your Roth 401k. Right.
That's exactly right. And just don't forget about, if that company matches, you at least want to put that minimum amount in. We've talked about that on the show before. If you're not putting in the minimum amount to get that maximum match, then you're just leaving money on the table. And I don't think anybody wants to work for free. So
No.
take advantage for that, because really what you're doing is you're giving up some of that money. So take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, Cory, don't be like me today. Don't work for free.
Right.
But seriously, and I learned this from you, Cory, and that is also a great tip that you've given on the show before that I really took to heart. It was a while back, but you said, if you get that raise every year, obviously you're living without it now. So
Sure.
if you get whatever your raise is, from 2% to 10%, whatever you get for a raise or a bonus, you've made it this far without it. You can make it without it. Put that into your retirement savings, and that's what I do. I've started doing that a couple of years ago. I started, anytime I get a raise, that just goes into my retirement account. I don't even take that.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. If you don't need it today, you might need a little bit of it to keep up with inflation potentially.
True.
But you're not going to need all of it.
Yeah.
So again, if you don't see it, you're not going to spend it.
Yeah. In 2022, I needed it.
I think everybody needed a little bit of extra.
It got a little tight. I still put it I put my raise into my 401k, and then I'm like, wait a minute, everything costs twice as much.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Another thing I think a lot of people really should think about is you really don't want to rely too much on Social Security if possible while you go into retirement as well. The average check is a little over $1,700 on a monthly basis. That's a little over $18,000. And even if you're going to get $3,000 a month in retire, off of Social Security, if in retirement, that's still only $36,000 a year. So most people's lifestyle is going to be above that. So don't rely on it. We hear everything. Is it going to be there? When we reach retirement, who knows? But don't rely on it. Obviously we can help you maximize that in retirement. But I think a lot of times too many people rely on Social Security for retirement income, and really you need to focus on yourself, and that's by saving as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, saving is key, and that's a big mistake that a lot of people make, and we've all been there. I mean, I don't know anyone who right out of college started putting a lot of money away for retirement. I'm sure there are some, and applause to them, because most people don't even think about putting into a 401k until they're older. And nowadays, I think it's changed a little bit. There's people like you on the radio telling people every day, you got to do this, or at least every week we're on here. So what's another mistake that people make in retirement, Cory?
Well, I think a lot of times, people put money into your 401k, and especially if you're at a company where, you say you've been there for a while. I think a lot of times they never go in and just kind of look at how they're invested and what their strategy is. We had a good year in 2023. No matter what happened, if you were invested in stocks, it naturally grew, but that also meant that your risk level went up as well. So one of the things that I would highly recommend is, at least on an annual basis, you kind of go in, find out what your risk score is. As you get closer to retirement, you're going to find out that you become a little bit more conservative, and you just kind of need to be able to make sure that you are invested that way. Now, a lot of 401ks out there now have, what we call target funds, like 2030 or 2035 or 2040. And those could be a nice way to be able to balance out your strategy, for the fact as you get closer to that year or to that target date fund, every year you're going to get a little bit more conservative to kind of follow what you should be, for a typical person, on their risk level. But let's face it, you might not be typical. You might be a little bit more conservative, or you might be a little bit more aggressive. So that's why it's so important to find out what your risk score is. And, you can go out to our website at safeharboroh.com. We have a risk assessment where you can go in, and it's 11 questions. It's going to tell you it's going to give you a number, and that number is going to basically mean what percentage of your money should be invested in stocks. And then you can kind of go back and look at that to make sure that you are allocated the correct way.
Yeah. Yeah, asset allocation. And, that might sound technical, but that is one of the most important parts of retirement planning, isn't it? Where is your money at? In fact, I know you've said, Cory, something you said a while back really caught my attention, and that is, it's not necessarily how much you have. It's more about when and where you have it. Right? When you're with where it's at, and what it's doing for you, and when you need to access that money. Right?
That's exactly right. And, again, the earlier that you come in and work with an advisor, we're going to be able to sit down, put together a long-term plan for you. And as you hit certain milestones, we might be able to recommend some different types of products and solutions for you as well. Because at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you have a comfortable retirement. Hopefully the easiest part is being able to save. The most difficult part is to be able to make sure that you're taking it out the right way when you do retire, and it's going to last your entire lifetime. And that's what an advisor can help you do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the key, is you don't want to run out of money in retirement. And we've talked about all the different expenses in retirement. Two of the biggies are healthcare and taxes. So planning can really help minimize that, or help make sure you've got that covered. Now, before we move on, Cory, this is a good time to let our listeners know how they can get that plan in place so they can have a happy, successful retirement. I know that you're offering a no-charge consultation. There is no obligation to continue. There's no cost to that. What is the number, and how can our listeners get a hold of you to set that up?
Yeah, for our listeners as well as our viewers out there, you can always give us a call at 614-760-0670, or you can always visit our website at safeharboroh.com. Again, we're here to help and guide you to make sure that you're going to have the retirement that you want. The best way to be able to do that is to set up a no cost, no obligation meeting with us. Again, all of our meetings are complimentary, whether it's the first meeting or third meeting. Again, our phone number is 614-760-0670. Or again, you can visit us online at safeharboroh.com. And one of the things we'll do for you is put a financial plan in place. Or if you don't have one, we'll put one in place. If you do have one, we'll be that second set of eyes and provide a second opinion.
All right. Well, I think that's great. And I hope our listeners pick up the phone, give you a call. That number again is 614-760-0670. And they can set up a consultation. You've got a great staff there, a lot of resources at Safe Harbor for our viewers and listeners out there. Now, Cory, today you're talking about mistakes in retirement planning. And of course, you started with the biggie, not saving enough. And people might go, well, that's obvious. But, you dug into it a little bit and went over why it's important and how we can save and what options there are. There are a number of options. What else do you want to cover today as far as mistakes to avoid in retirement planning?
I think a big one is kind of underestimating what you're truly going to pay on healthcare costs, Tony. And obviously we all know that at some point in time you're going to go on to Medicare,
Yep.
So, you can start taking that at age 65. And right now, Medicare Part B is probably about $175. It'll be $175 a month here in 2024. And then if you have a supplement on top of that, obviously, you have to pay for that as well, and you can be paying anywhere from $300 to $350 for your supplement and your prescription plan, and if you want dental or anything like that as well. So that can definitely be something. But what I would really recommend for all of our listeners and viewers out there is, again, this is a great time to be able to sit down with an advisor to find out, are there ways to be able to potentially pay for the number one potential cost in retirement. That's your health care. Your long-term care. So there are solutions out there where we can help and guide you to find the right type of solution for you. If you're worried about being able to, deal with long-term care, I think a lot of my clients today, that are in their 60s, they're actually dealing with their parents now that are actually dealing with long-term care. We're living longer, Tony. And
Yeah.
I think the longer we live, there's a better chance that you're going to have at some point, some time spent in a long-term care facility.
Yeah, we are living longer and longer, Cory, and I think that's so important. We've talked about long-term care too, and the reason we talk about it is because it's so crucial. So many people, the odds are it's about 2 out of every 3 people who live past the age of 65 are going to need long-term care at some point.
Right.
And so a lot of people say, well, that's not me. I'm not going to need long-term care. Odds are against you, so you better plan on it, especially if you're married. There's a huge chance you or your spouse will eventually need it. So you got to plan for healthcare. And you mentioned Medicare. Medicare is great, but it doesn't cover everything. It really, it only in a very special circumstance and only for a short portion of time will Medicare cover long-term care. I think 90 to 100 days at most. Yeah, and that's right. Only if you're coming from a hospital into long-term care, things like that. There's a lot of criteria. Plus, it doesn't cover hearing, vision, or dental. So I'm glad you brought up healthcare costs. That's huge.
Yeah, when you talk about that 90 days, Tony, what they're doing is just confirming that you're going to have to go into a facility.
Right.
So once you go into that facility, then you're going to have to pay for it yourself, or spend it all down and eventually go into Medicaid or whatever that might be. But again, work with an advisor. We're here to help and guide you. to kind of give you some type of solutions as well. And obviously, healthcare is going to be a big one. Don't underestimate it. And again, we're here to help you. But I think one of the things that you really should kind of focus on too, before you get into retirement, you want to eliminate as much debt as out there that's possible. Pay that house off.
Eliminating debt. Yeah.
Right. Pay that house off. Hopefully you don't have credit card bills, but the less debt that you have going into retirement, it's going to lower your overall fixed expenses.
Right.
So the number one cost per month could be your mortgage going into retirement. Number two is healthcare. You're never going to get rid of number two, but you have the potential to get rid of number one. And I'd highly recommend that you be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. Obviously, debt is huge, especially the really bad. There's really bad debt, and there's debt that's can be okay. You want to pay off the high interest debt like credit cards first, and then worry about the mortgage. A lot of people think, well, before I retire, I should, take some of my retirement money and pay off the house. You shouldn't be doing that because, especially if you have a low interest loan, right? I mean, there's some debt that isn't truly bad, like a mortgage. If I've got, my wife and I have 2.9 or 2.8, I'd rather use the bank's money for that than my retirement money, right?
Exactly right. Again, everyone's situation is different, Tony, but many times people will come in and say, hey, I want to pay my mortgage off. And here's the other part. Say you owe $30,000 or $40,000 going into retirement on it, paying 2 or 3%. You're paying very little of interest.
Yeah,
because it's worth a lot less than $200,000 or $400,000. So and once you give that money up, in case you need an emergency fund, if that's where it's coming from, now you have an issue where now you got to go get a credit line or take more money out of your retirement account. So again, before you pay that house off, work with your advisor, make sure you're doing the right thing. Because everyone's situation is different, but in most cases, Tony, it's not going to make sense to pay that mortgage off as soon as you do retire.
Yeah. So what's something else? Are there any other mistakes in retirement planning you wanted to touch on today?
Well, kind of going into, we just talked about mortgages and things, but I don't think a lot of people, and they probably should do this a little bit more often. I think we're seeing this more, and that is, should I actually downsize? Right?
Oh,
I think downsize is something that more and more people should really think about. Do you need that big house? Can you possibly take the money that you have for where you are today, take some of that money, buy a house that's going to be a little bit smaller. Maybe it's a condo or whatever that is. Now you have a little bit more money to put in that retirement fund as well. So, really think about downsizing. In the Columbus area here, it's tough to get a one level, home. And I'm sure it's that way up in Minneapolis too, Tony.
It is in Minnesota here, especially in the Twin Cities area. Finding a rambler or a ranch, whatever you call it, a one-level home is really tough. My wife and I have been looking around, and there just aren't that many.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I know we only have maybe a couple more minutes here, but one of the next things I do want to talk about kind of go hand in hand. The first one is don't overlook your estate plan. Get that stuff in order.
Yeah.
If you don't have a will or you don't have a trust, get those in place. You need your financial and healthcare power of attorney, your living wills. You need all that stuff in place. Make sure that all your assets are going to go exactly the way that you want to. Don't leave it up to some judge or probate court in order to determine where your assets that you worked all your life for are going to go. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, and this is a big one, and that's procrastination, Tony. I think people keep putting it off and off. You know what? I'm going to get my legal stuff in order next year or 6 months from now, or I'm going to start saving or whatever that might end up being. Don't procrastinate. Get it done. Hey, it's February really of 2024 here. You still have 11 months for this year. So let's get that done, in 2024, whatever financial goals or whatever you need to get done. Let's get that done right now. So then you can sit back, relax, and start saving or whatever you're really wanting to be able to do, for your retirement plan.
Right. Well, don't put it off. Well, we're out of time, Cory. Before we go, let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, for our listeners out there and viewers, just give us a call at 614-760-0670, or feel free to visit us online at safeharboroh.com. We're here to help and guide you to make sure that you're going to have the retirement that you want. And the best way to be able to do that is to set up a complimentary, no obligation meeting with us. If you have a financial plan, we'll be that second set of eyes and provide you a second opinion. If you don't have one, we'll put one in place for you. This is the time, to make sure that you're going to have the retirement that you want. So take advantage of that and come in and schedule a complimentary, no obligation meeting with us.
All right. That sounds great, Cory. And that does it for today's episode of Financially Fit Radio.
Yeah, join us next week for another episode of Financially Fit Radio.